First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to this conference. And so I'm a medievalist, and as such, I work with manuscripts. But for me, the paleography was more a reading tool. Really, I'm not the pretension to be a paleograph, but I was always fascinated by the scripts used in the manuscript, and I practiced a lot the calligraphy. So it was very interesting for me to prepare this conference, which has allowed me to reflect on the activity that I first encountered through the practice. And this morning, I would like to speak about one of the emblematic style of writing from the Middle Age, which is the Gothic script, and offer some hypotheses as the reason for its success. So the term Gothic refers to the broad range of scripts used between the 1200 and the and 1500, so 300 years, which scholars have sought to organize in two distinct typology. We have spoken on that just before. And the more important classification for I will speak of the Gothic script in the book, so not in the documentary text. But the most important typology that we have yet is the paleography of Gothic manuscript books from the 12th to early century, made by Albert de Roulet. Yeah. So this is the really studies tool that we have. And this typology highlights the wide range of writing style encompassed within the broad category of Gothic script. So I will speak of Gothic in general, but it's really encompass a lot of different script style. So the purpose of my presentation will be to discuss the reason for the choice of Gothic scripts and what's allowed the scripture to remain in use through the second half of the Middle Age until it became the font in which the Gutenberg Bibles was printed. So they had a huge longevity. The scripture has a huge longevity. And by asking ourselves in general terms, what is the advantage of writing in Gothic? The questions opens one other question, which is why abandon the writing system that precedes the Gothic script, namely the Carolingian script? So this question is all the more legitimate given that the Carolingian script has undeniable qualities that are not reproduced in the Gothic script. So here is the definition that gives Albert de Roulet. So the main characteristic of the Carolingian script, openness and differentiation of individual letter form, gave way to the closed form and the uniformity of the Gothic script. This mind that the main characteristic of Carolingian script is its clarity, which is produced by the fact that every letter has in such a way is its own shape, whereas the Gothic script features letter with very similar shapes, resulting in a great uniformity. But this great similarity between Gothic letters inevitably leads to confusion when we have to read. So this confusion is particularly noticeable between the letter M and U and I. So, and if you see, you have here an example of Caroline and then the Gothic, and you can see the word cunctis, which we can very easily read in Caroline, and then in Gothic it becomes a little bit complicated. But we have here a very, very beautiful Gothic, so not too complicated. This difficulty of in determining the letter was recognized during the Middle Age and illustrate also in visual games that the script transcribe in their manuscript. So this is a well-known example among the people which deal with Gothic. And that illustrates clearly the fact that when you combine only M, N, U, and E, at a point, you only see a vertical stroke. So that's so as for the pangram, so the meaning of the sentence has really no interest, but it's really a visual game. And this shows that the reading the Gothic was a problem for the reader, but also perhaps for the writer, because it's complicated to know where you are when you are writing this kind of sequence of letter. Clearly, so the Gothic script does not constitute a step towards a greater text legibility. Yet it spread throughout the second half of the Middle Age, and this was a period during which the demand for books and the dissemination of text increased significantly compared to the previous centuries, due in part to the establishment of university and chancellery. It's not the only factor, but it is one. And this establishment requires written document for scientific and administration. So we have more gross demand from big demand for the text and the choice of a scripture, which is not so easy to read. The question is why. So even if the process of going to Gothic script is a result of a semi-conscious decision, and it's a very slow process, so it's not from one day to the other, it takes centuries, it's a very slow transformation. But even counting that, the Gothic remained used during more than 300 years, and it proves that it has advantage over the Carolingian script. However, it's also highlight that its advantages do not necessarily lie with the reader, as the text lose a part of its legibility, but more certainly with the writer. So in this presentation, I propose to evaluate 3 characteristics specific from the Gothic script. So the possibility of saving space, the densification of abbreviation, which is occurred in the Gothic, and at the end, the letter shape or pattern, so the ductus. And to make this comparison, I have chosen to show you 6 different manuscripts from, and this is manuscript from the Bible. So these are precious manuscripts, which are used not only for consultation, but also for decoration. So I show you here, and I will first present the manuscript, and then we will see which difference there is between each of them. So the 2 first are manuscript in Carolingian script. And in all these manuscripts, I always take the same page of the Genesis, so it's easier also to compare the state of the scripture, and we can move forward in the time and see how it changed. So the 2 first manuscripts are manuscript in Carolingian script. So you have here the manuscript of St. Gall, which is the older, so 19th centuries. It's a real ornamental Caroline. And then I have took another example, which is from the 11th century, when we see that already there is a question of space, and the script want to write more letter, and so he squeezed a little. The Caroline is a little bit squeezed, and it begins more angular. So there is really a question of like, if you are less curved scripture, then you have more space. Here we are a third example, which is from the 12th century, and which is part from all the scripture that we put in the back of the pre-Gothical scripture. It's defined as a proto-Gothic, and it allows us to see really this state of transition between Caroline and Gothic. And then, so here it's an example that you see one of the question of this case of transition is the question of the D. That's the D, the vertical D, it's coming from the Caroline, and this one, it's coming from the Unshell, so another scripture. But in the Gothic, it's become more and more current, because it's also give you some space on the parchment, and the Gothic script at the end will almost abandon the verticality. So we are in this stage of transitions, and then we have 3 manuscripts from the 13th century, and here, no, 2 from the 17th, and the last one is from the 14th century. The interest of this manuscript will more to see how the abbreviation increase from the Gothic in the Gothic system. And also it's a question that I have not mentioned, but the question of the format of the text. So the further one are big formats, but here we have a very small, well, not so small, but a smaller format for the manuscript. And this one allowed us to see also if the abbreviations are linked or not with the size of the book. It's not always directly linked. So, coming to the first point, the idea of saving space. Writing in Gothic allows more letters to be written on the same parchment. So saving parchment, it's something that has much interest because it's still an expensive medium. This is true, but I saw it. But it's not. Saying it. The only reason. So when you go from the Caroline manuscript and remove all the curve, it's easier. You can like put more letter on the parchment, and also you see when you have the real size of the text that the Gothic manuscripts are almost always a little bit in a smaller format. Not all, but often. I'm sorry, I just have to refine myself. In the so if we see here, it's always the same extract of all the text, and it's just for you to visualize that in Gothic, it's effectively take less space than in Carolingian, but not in every scripture. So the question of the space is still open, and it's more interesting when we compare the text proportion versus the size of the margin in the manuscript. Here you have all the manuscript at the scale, so 1:7. So you can really see that the manuscript of the 13th century is really smaller than the other. And if we do the calculation to see in which proportion we have text and which proportion we have margin, we have something a little bit strange, which is that in the Carolingian manuscript, we have smaller margin in proportion of the space devoted to the text. And particularly in the manuscript of Bern, this one, where we see this Caroline, which is a little bit more angular. So, but if we look at for the Gothic manuscript, they had a wide margin, and the text never occupies more than 14% of the surface available. So perhaps it was for space for the decorations, as we see here in the manuscript from Lausanne. But it was also an argument that for the people that comment in this kind of book, here we are in kind of precious manuscript, luxurious one, the question of the space is not the main question. So the Gothic script has the advantage to squeeze the letter and make more space available, but it's not the only reason for what it will choose for writing this manuscript. So we can go for the second topic, which is the densification of abbreviations. And that is also a big characteristic of the Gothic script. So here we're comparing always the same sentence of the Genesis, and we will see how the abbreviation system progress. So first, at the beginning, we have only the nomina sacra. So it's the name related to the liturgy. Here it's Dominus Deus. And then if we go a little bit further in the second manuscript, you can see that there is some tilde. So here, and some letters are abbreviated. And also we begin to have this, which is the A with a cedilla, which go at the place where we had before the I diphthong. Already in the antiquity, the diphthong I was read as a single sound, A. Here, the transformation of the letter merely catch up with the phonetic phenomenon. But it is interesting to note that orthographic simplification is accomplished in the Gothic script, which seeks the abbreviation. So finally, we can have from the first Gothic manuscript. So here, we finally have just the A and no more indication that it was an I before. And we see also a specialization in the abbreviation. So, for example, this word, which is terre, here, it's T with a tilde and RE. And when we go in the Gothic, we see that there is no more tilde, but another kind of abbreviation. So we are going, which is this kind of kleine, small R. So we are going in a system which is more abbreviated, with abbreviation that's become more specialized. But the specialization of abbreviation allowed also to have a better understanding of the word, because it clarifies the typology of the abbreviations. And if we go across the time, you will see more and more abbreviated letter. So until you arrive in the last one, and then we are in the disco time. No, in the last one, where you see also the Q, the qui with the E above the letter, which is an abbreviation of the pronoun qui, but it's an abbreviation which also has a purpose to clarify the word, because at the time we can just have a Q with a tilde, and here it's specify which kind of letter there is, and so it gives precision to the reader. So what we see is that the system of the abbreviated system, it become denser. It's and but also at the point more has more clarity. So the question is, what are the reasons for this densification? As we see, saving the parchment is not only the reason for adopting Gothic script, at least in the case of the precious books manuscript that we are studying now. The second reason for proliferation of abbreviations is the time saved by the script. So from the end of the 12th century, the copyists were not longer only working for the monastery, but some from corporation. And in this case, they were paid for the number of the books that they can produce. So the more books they produce, the more money they earn. And in this case, abbreviation can be being used for saving time, so being faster in the copy. But in the luxurious manuscripts that we see now, the abbreviations are almost calligraphic. And it's a question, but I think you clearly win sometimes, but not so much, doing all this abbreviation very consciously about the letter. So I will be inclined to add a third factor to this 2-1. It's that the question of the of the specialization of knowledge that occurs a part of the 13th century. And then it's create a community between, I think, the copyist and the reader, which allows them to have in common this abbreviation system, which is nourished from year to year, and this complexity himself, because also of the school, the time of study. So the reader has a real habit of the abbreviation, the copyist also, and then they can begin to build a system which becomes more and more complicated. And now we go to the last part of my reflection, which is really an hypothesis of my part. So an idea which can be at the first from a personal experience. So I said I'm just not a paleographer, but I have practiced calligraphy extensively, and I learn. So I have write a lot of time in the different scripture, and at the time we decide to show the Latin scripture to some school children. And so we have to choose one scripture to teach the scripture, and we choose the Gothic for two reasons. First, it was really an emblematic one from the Middle Age. When you see Gothic, you think about Middle Age. But the second was that it was the scripture the easier to teach and to learn. And so when I am preparing this conference, I really reflect on this question and asking myself why, because it was an intuition, and it really realizes when I go in the classroom and teach several scriptures. It's always the Gothic which has the better result, the quicker. It needs more time to be able to write in Caroline and more in Ancial. So I reflect on that, and I think that the key is perhaps in the construction of the letter. If you compare the ductus of the Caroline and the Gothic script, with here the letter L, M, N, and O, we see that the Gothic script actually use two different strokes, one vertical and one diagonal strokes. And with these strokes, you can basically build all the letters of the alphabet. So the L, the M, and the O are written with only two strokes, and what is changing is basically the size of your strokes. On the contrary, the Carolingian script has different strokes, not for each letter, but almost. And the particular shape of the letter, which is the strength of the Carolingian script, it's also the reason for what the scripture is more complex to write, because the script has to integrate different wrist movements. So when you are writing in Gothic, you can basically have the same angle of scripture in all your letter, and you don't have to move too much your whistle. But when you are writing in Carolingian script, there is things that you have to you have to move more your whistle. It can be a small thing, but if we are if we speak of hundreds of manuscripts and thousands of hours of copying text, then you really save time, and also you save movement writing in Gothic. And you can be also faster because it's only two movements that you repeat and repeat and repeat. And on the questions, I have read an article of Matt Spies, and you say that it was a Gothic était plus mécanique, so that it was a more mechanical way of writing, which I found very true. And for me, it's probably here when the reason of the success of the Gothic script, it's really for saving economizing the movement from the copyist. So you can produce more text in the less time. And I think it's, well, it was, no, I arrive at the end. So but it's really a question for me, which is open, this question of, by experience, yes. And also I write faster in Gothic as in other scripture. I like the Onchal, so I have spent a lot of time to write in Onchal, but still I'm still faster in Gothic. So I thought that it is a reason for the success of this scripture because you're really saving time, but I have no proof of that. So if someone have intervention, I take it with pleasure.
Thank you very much.